I'm excited to have you all here as part of a member benefit of ACEC Texas, and happy to provide another webinar for ACEC Texas. I'm really disappointed I didn't get to come down there today, this year, because of the current crisis, and hoping that hopefully I'll be able to get down there next year. Today's topic is Cash is King, Managing Cash Flow During Economic Recovery. And I'm not even sure we're in an economic recovery right now. I would say we might be in an economic slowdown that could potentially get even worse. So I think this topic is even more important than ever. And I'm hoping you get some really great ideas today about how to look at your cash flow even in a little bit different way than maybe you have in the past. So our agenda today, first we're going to talk about why cash flow is so important, especially now, the difference between revenue, profit, and cash. Then we're going to look at your project life cycle and see there's a lot of different places that cash flow gets held up in an engineering firm, and we're going to talk about what the real cash flow cycle looks like for an engineering firm. It's not always what the accountants measure, and I am an accountant, so I have a very different way of looking at AR and days outstanding for your receivables. Then we're going to talk about what your 3 biggest challenges are with your cash flow, and hopefully give you some really good new best practices to focus on going forward to increase your cash flow. And I just wanted to let you all know that I will be answering questions at the end. So if you think of any questions as we're going along, I'm not going to stop. I'll just keep going through the material. And then when we get to the end, if there's any questions in the Q&A, I'll be happy to answer your questions and stick around as long as you want to answer any questions that you have, even the hard ones. So my background is I'm the author of the book, Find the Lost Dollars, 6 Steps to Increase Profits in Architecture, Engineering, and Environmental Firms. I will give you an opportunity to get a copy of that at the end of this presentation, so make sure you stick around for the end. And now what I do for a living is, for 25 years, I was a Dell Tech partner, implementing first originally the Win2 FMS software, and then the Dell Tech Vision product for many, many, many years. I had over 1,000 A&E firms as clients, been in the industry a really long time. And everything that I teach is based on working with those hundreds and hundreds of firms across the United States, both small, medium, and large. And now what I do is I help A&E firms to become more profitable by teaching employees how to deliver profitable projects, and by helping firms improve their processes and their systems to make their company run more smoothly and more profitably. So, and I will tell you a little bit more about that at the very end. So I like this cartoon, and many of you probably deal with this on a daily basis. These are your clients. This is what they're doing, right? They're sitting there in their office saying, well, you know, we don't need to pay this right away. Maybe we'll wait until somebody calls us to see whether we're going to pay them or not. And so this is what is going on every day. This is my philosophy of cash flow. When your clients don't pay you, you are financing their projects. Now, I'm sure that most of you do not want to be a bank. You do not want to finance your clients' projects, but that's exactly what is happening. Your clients are counting on that. They're counting on those extra 30, 60, or 90 or more days to pay you. And so you need to do everything you can possible to stop being the bank. And we're going to talk about that in depth, in detail, and all the many, many things that you can do to stop financing your clients' projects. One of the reasons that I kind of lay this out the way I do is part of the problem in engineering firms is the mindset of many of your employees who don't really understand this concept. And so part of what is important in this topic is making sure everyone really gets it. And especially your project managers, if you're counting on them to help you collect some money. So I want to start out by talking about something that I work with clients quite a bit on a regular basis with our Find the Lost Dollars training program that we have. And what I find is that one of the big obstacles, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more later on, but one of the big obstacles you have is that your employees, they love your clients and they want to keep your clients happy at all costs. And so because of that, they don't like rocking the boat. They don't like asking for money. They're not comfortable asking for money. They're not comfortable having those conversations. And some of the things, the feedback that I hear from those employees, so sometimes I do role-playing sessions with project managers to try to get them more comfortable with having conversations about asking for change orders and asking a client to pay an outstanding invoice. And what I find, the response that I get from many of them is, well, we have this great relationship. And I tell them, if you have a great relationship, your clients will pay you. So if your clients aren't paying you, they are not your ideal client. They are not your best client. They are not your number one client, and you don't have a great relationship. And that's the truth. I hate to tell it the way it is, but the clients you have really great relationships with are paying you in a much more timely basis. And those clients who aren't paying you, there's something else going on there. Because when a client truly values your work and wants to make sure that you're there for them when they need you, they're going to pay you on time because they want you to be a healthy firm. They want you to stay profitable. They want you to be solvent, especially in a bad economy when it's risky, right? In the last big recession in 2008, I had several clients that were very prominent, decent size, over 100 employee engineering firms went out of business. And the whole reason they went out of business was because of cash flow. And they had millions of dollars in accounts receivable. And because of that, and because many of their clients were like land developers, they went out of business and they sold to some other firm for pennies on the dollar. It was really disappointing, really upsetting, and many of their employees lost their jobs. And so this is a critical factor, and I just want you to really think about really who is your ideal customer. And your ideal customer or client is a client that pays you. So cash flow causes a lot of serious issues in your firm. And not everyone that is dealing with your clients really gets this or really understands this. And part of what I deal with on a daily basis when I'm working with PMs and other employees is I really try to get them to embrace the idea of the importance of cash flow and how different it is than revenue. And we're going to talk about that in a sec. But cash flow causes a lot of problems. First of all, if you don't have enough cash, you have to borrow money to make payroll, to pay the bills, to stay in business. And when you don't have cash flow, everything gets tightened up. Employees can't get raises and bonuses. You can't invest in technology. If there is a recession or your revenue starts to decline or your backlog starts to decline, you don't have a strong buffer unless you have a lot of cash in the bank. You can't, as I said, you can't take care of your employees the way you want to. And it can be very hard on your PMs because now all of a sudden they have to start having on a regular basis very difficult conversations with clients. And also, I don't think a lot of firms think about this, but there's a cost associated with all the time it takes to follow up on AR, all the phone conversations, all of the emails, and all of the pain that you have to go through to try to get your clients to pay you. So it is not, the problems that cash flow causes are severe. Now, profit, revenue, and cash flow are not the same thing, but unfortunately, some of your employees don't understand that. They think of revenue and cash flow as kind of the same thing. We have lots of work, we're busy, so there's no problem, right? And they don't really understand cash versus accrual accounting. Cash accounting being based on the cash coming in the door, that's the revenue from cash. And accrual accounting, the revenue is usually based on either billing or work in process. So what you've spent on a project. So it's a big difference. You could have a ton of work going on. You could have millions of dollars in invoices going out the door to your clients, but because of poor cash flow, you're cash poor. There isn't enough money in the bank to pay the bills. And again, this is a huge problem. And during an economic downturn, it usually gets much, much worse. What you start to find is that everyone starts to pay slower. And I think this is even going to be a problem in the next year or two with state and local governments, getting even slower than they already are. For a number of reasons. You have some of their employees working remotely, so it's kind of slowed them down in terms of their normal process. And they're going to have less revenue themselves coming in from taxes, and because of all the money they're putting out for unemployment benefits and healthcare costs, I think state and local governments are going to slow down payments. Everyone's going to slow down payments. And so it's very, very important, and even to keep an eye on the difference between cash and accrual. When that gap starts to get bigger and bigger, then you really know that you've got some big problems going on. So the way that accountants measure cash flow is they look at the average accounts receivable divided by sales or revenue, and they multiply it by 365, and that is the number of days, average number of days that it takes you across all of your clients to collect your accounts receivable, to collect on your invoices. And you have some clients that pay sooner, and you have some that take longer, and so this is a measure of the average, but many firms like to look at it by client so that you can see what's really going on. Now, I got a couple graphs from the Deltek Clarity study, and the recent Deltek Clarity study recently just came out in the last couple months. And on average, you know, it's about in the 70s for the most part, the average number of days it takes to collect on your accounts receivable. And I think, honestly, with the clients that I've been working with recently, it's a lot longer than that. It's many firms have a lot of accounts receivable sitting over 90 days. The longer it takes to collect the money, the lower the chance of getting the money. And that is just a pattern that has gone on forever. And there's reasons why your clients are not paying you. It's your job to figure out what those reasons are. Are they unhappy with your firm? Are they broke? Did they never receive the invoice? Do they disagree with the invoice? What is the reason they are not paying you? And finding out those reasons is a very important aspect of getting paid faster. Really, the 10-year trend has not changed a lot in the last 8 or so years. It's kind of hovered around in the 70s as far as Deltek's calculations and based on the Deltek Clarity survey that they did of A&E firms. Now, what I want to talk about now is the project life cycle. And what I'm going to show you is that the day sales outstanding that your accountants are showing you isn't really the true measure of your cash flow. And those of you who are CFOs, I have a whole lot of CFOs on here today. And what's interesting also about the groups that have signed up for this presentation is we have a lot of firms where there's several people from one firm attending, and I think that's wonderful, because this solving a serious problem like cash flow or slow cash flow takes more than just one or two people to solve. It's a company-wide problem. And I'm going to get into that in a minute to show you why it's a company-wide problem. Many people don't think of it that way, but it is. So think of your project life cycle. You start doing some marketing, and then you identify some opportunities, and you decide to do some proposals for those opportunities. And then you start preparing proposals, creating your estimates, your scopes of services. And then finally you put your bids in. Maybe you get shortlisted and have an interview process. And finally, once you are awarded the project, then you might even have to wait a little while until the project gets started. Then you start working on the project. And then finally, now if you look here, you are like 3/4 of the way through your project life cycle before you ever even send an invoice to your client, right? You have put time into every single one of these efforts to go out and win the project and get through that sales process. And then the process of initiating the project, the kickoff meeting, starting the work, getting your employees all set up to do the project, doing the work, managing the project. Finally, after months have gone by, maybe you get to send them an invoice. And then you have to wait until your clients finally receive the invoice, approve the invoice, pay the invoice, and that cash ends up in your bank account. So I did a little bit of guessing about what the real cash flow cycle looks like for most firms. And so first you work on the proposal, let's say 2 weeks, right? And really this doesn't even include the BD time that you're spending looking for the opportunity. Okay, I'm starting here with the proposal. In fact, there's really more time. In some cases, you may spend a year trying to build a relationship with a client to get to this point of working on a proposal. But let's just assume you work on a proposal for a couple weeks, then you wait a month to find out whether it's been awarded. It could be 2 months, the interview. And in today's world, it could be even longer. Then you might wait another 30 days to start a project. I was talking to a client of mine in California the other day, and she was telling me that the project starts have slowed down significantly since COVID started. So who knows? I don't even know how long this is, but projects that you're waiting to get started, I put 30 days for that. And then you work on a project for 30 days before you actually close out a billing period, and then you bill, and that usually takes the average firm 1 to 2 weeks to get their invoices out, and then your client has to receive that. And so then you add on the 73 days, right? The 73 days that Deltek's reporting on is after you've sent this invoice, but this is your true cash cycle. You are paying people's payroll throughout this whole cycle for these projects. And so I'm telling you, your true cash cycle for us is really 192 days. That is over 6 months. And if you went and did this calculation for yourself, you might find it's a lot longer. So I hope that doesn't scare you guys too much, but it is definitely worth your time to focus in on what you can do to fix this. And if you think about this, every piece of this cycle can be shortened. And in a minute, I'm going to talk about the billing cycle, because a lot of firms have an unnecessarily long billing cycle. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And we're going to get into that and talk about why that is and how to make it a lot faster. So there are 3 main challenges with cash flow. And I'm not sure any of you have ever thought of it this way before, but I've kind of categorized the issues into three big areas, okay? The first area is clients. That's probably the one you think of the most. First of all, our clients don't want to pay us, do they? They're going to find every reason they can not to pay, right? Because they want us to finance their projects. So that is a huge issue. Number two, the firms that are growing quickly, and there are still some firms, even through this crisis, that are growing quickly. But even if you just look at over the last year before the crisis started, many of you were growing really quickly. Fast growth is a nightmare for cash flow, right? Because let's say you're hiring a number of people every month. Well, it takes you time to recruit, hire, get that person onboarded, trained, and ready to work on a project and be productive, and then your regular cash flow cycle kicks in for that employee. So fast growth requires you to invest a huge amount of money in people and technology before you ever get any cash return on investment from those people. Again, your clients want you to finance the projects. They scrutinize every item on your invoice. So if your invoices are not pristine, they're going to slow down payment. And you don't understand what they want. And I'm going to go into some examples of that in a few minutes. But if you really think about it, the reason they scrutinize every item on your invoice is because you haven't presented the information in a way that's going to, number one, give them reasons that, or no excuses not to pay you, and also just making sure it's the way they want it, right? Because that's, they want the information a certain way. If you don't give it to them that way, then they're going to hold up your payment. So the second challenge is your billing cycle. This is something I go in and help firms with all the time. I can normally take a firm that has a 15-day billing cycle and get it down to 3 days or 4 days. And there is no reason that this shouldn't happen. The reason you have a slow billing cycle, your time and expense processes are slow and possibly inaccurate. If people are charging to the wrong projects, phases, tasks, time has to be moved around all the time, there's all these corrections, that takes time and it slows down your billing cycle. And your project managers may not be doing a great job of approving those time and expenses. Also, a lot of firms have too many rate schedules. There's so much complexity in the way that they've set up their system to do their billing. And with a lot of clients requiring specific billing formats, you may have a lot of manual invoice processes going on. And they also may require a lot of backup data that goes with your invoice, and that will slow you down too. And then there's sometimes there's just not enough urgency. You know, I was talking to a client yesterday and I asked them to outline their billing cycle for me. And she said, well, we will get the billing reports out to the managers on Monday and they have to have it back by Friday. That's unacceptable. It's just absolutely unacceptable. I know they're busy. I know they are. But this is one of the most important responsibilities that they have. Challenge number 3 is collections. First of all, your PMs, a lot of the weight or the burden of collections ends up on the project managers. And I have some good alternatives for that. Your PMs were not ever trained or have very often the skill sets to talk with clients about money. And it can be a difficult situation. It's something that they actually avoid quite a bit. That's why you have write-offs every month, because they don't like to ask for change orders. It's a very uncomfortable situation. So that's something I work on quite a bit with the PMs. And part of it is just their, it's a paradigm shift very often that they need, but they also need skill sets that you can help provide to them. You have ineffective collection processes. There may be inconsistency across your company. There isn't maybe a set process for how you manage your cash flow. You don't have enough leverage with your client to get paid. And sometimes you need to exert some leverage. Again, many firms are afraid to do this because they believe that they have these amazing relationships with clients. And again, if your clients love you, they will pay you. You may have pay when paid scenarios. And in my experience, because I've worked with a lot of architects over the years, and I actually did the books for one architectural firm for 15 years. I ran their back office, and I saw how they handled their pay when paid payments to their engineers, and I got a few tips along the way of who got paid faster. So we'll go into that in a minute. And I want to say this may be one of your biggest issues. You keep working with crappy clients, and that's actually one of the biggest problems throughout your firm. If there's anything happening in your firm that you don't like, if your profits aren't high enough, if your employees are not staying as long as they should, if you have a lot of issues with problems with rework, if you have clients asking for services for free or nickel and diming you, if they treat you like a commodity, and especially if they don't pay you, you are choosing to work with those bad clients. They are bad clients. And in a recession, many firms tend to take on more bad clients because they believe that times are tough. We have to take whatever we can get. And it's absolutely not the case. There's definitely some strategies that you can put in place that will enable you to get better clients. And firing bad clients actually will not only improve your cash flow, but your profitability. So let's talk about some cash flow best practices. I've got a few just kind of generic best practices, and then I'm going to focus in on all of these three big challenges that we just talked about. So first of all, big picture, manage your cash on a daily basis. This means every single day, keep cash top of mind with everyone. Not once a week, not every 2 weeks, not once a month. Every day, every single day, look at your cash. More and more firms are starting to do this because of when COVID crisis hit, everybody kind of realized that they didn't want to get into trouble really quickly because they didn't know what was going to happen. But I think it's starting to get a little bit more lax again, and this is something you just have to stay on top of. Second of all, I've seen some firms really fix some of their cash flow issues by eliminating unnecessary subscriptions, licenses. They're just overpaying. And these are just a few examples of companies that you might have subscriptions with. For example, I have a client, they're a bigger firm, they're about 300 people, and they did an analysis of their Microsoft licenses and found that they were way overpaying for their Microsoft. And they were able to save hundreds of thousands of dollars a year by going through and looking at their licenses on a regular basis and making sure they had the right licenses. So something to think about, with more and more subscriptions these days, everybody's got so many of them and you're just used to seeing them come through every month. It might not be it may not be top of mind. And then a third thing to think about is your pricing, how you create your fees, and the types of contracts that you go after. I do a lot of analysis and work with firms on contract types. And what I have found is that firms that have lump sum projects make more money than firms that have T&M. And I think, one of the culture traps that I talk about in my book, Find the Lost Dollars, is that many people think T&M are more profitable. But the problem with T&M is firms get trapped in low billing rates. There's no escalation clauses. Your overhead and your salaries have gone up over the years, but your rates haven't. And so the multipliers on those rates go down on every year, unfortunately. And so if you can get more lump sum jobs and manage them well, and that's the caveat, you can potentially make a lot more money. Also, there's a lot of clever pricing strategies that engineering firms can put into place, and I see very, very few firms doing these things. Packaging and bundling services, how you upsell and cross-sell clients at the time of when you do the project, or even the way that you write your proposals around that. There's a lot of things you can do, and so these are all going to just give you the ability to make some more money. Not necessarily cash related, but I just wanted to throw that in there because I just think it's really important. So let's address the best practices around clients. First of all, get to know your clients better. I recommend that your accounting people meet with your clients' accounting people and get to know them personally. Really understand your client's payment process. Who receives the invoices? How do they route those invoices through the approvals within the organization? What do they want to see on those invoices? What do they expect? And one of the things I like my clients to do is to set, when you get a new client or it's a new project, is to, when you send that first invoice, or even before you send the first invoice, tell them, hey, this is the invoice format we were planning to use for your invoices. Is this okay? You know, get some feedback from them. And, you know, if it's the first invoice you're sending for a new project, follow up immediately and ask them if it's okay. Are there any questions? I also like to put a line on the invoice that says something to the effect of, if we don't get any disputes in writing within 30 days, we'll consider this invoice accepted. But there, in my book, Find the Lost Dollars, I have all kinds of tips and tricks for cash flow and for everything else, by the way, for project management, managing scope creep, for sales and marketing, all kinds of stuff. But there's tons of things you can do. And these are just a few of the ideas. Charge a finance fee. You know, put that in your proposal, put it in your contract, get paid up front. Think about all those companies you have subscriptions with, like Microsoft and Dell Tech and Adobe. They're getting the money in advance. And a lot of companies are getting paid up front, but for some reason, engineering firms don't like to ask for money up front. And I think getting paid up front is a really great strategy. The more you can do it, the better. And especially if you have a new client. Just make sure there's no issues that they can use to deny payment. Make sure that you understand all of their criteria for accepting and approving an invoice. And take time to get their consensus on your invoices. So, and I have seen these processes work really well and makes a huge difference and builds a better relationship with your client to make sure you get it right. So the second challenge we talked about was the billing cycle. First of all, the number one reason your billing gets held up is your timesheets. Every one of your employees should be entering their timesheets daily. This needs to be enforced across your organization. Expense reports also. Your timesheets and your expense reports need to be accurate. Think about all the time your accounting department spends at the end of every month trying to correct things, moving time around, putting things on hold, changing billing rates, moving time from one phase to another. There's, again, in my book, there's dozens of ideas about how to improve your billing cycle. But if you can get your billing cycle down 4, 5, 6 days shorter, you're going to get paid faster. One of the little tricks that I like to do is to send an invoice before the end of the month. So if you're billing for June invoices, instead of sending your invoices in July, cut off your invoice cycle a week earlier, around the 25th of the month. So you bill from the 26th of the previous month to the 25th of the current month. And that way you get your bills out and in the hands of your client before the end of the month. You are more likely to get paid 30 days faster. And especially if you're a subcontractor. Because if you're a sub and you're billing to an architect or somebody else, another client that needs to bill to another client, the faster you get that invoice in their hands, you're going to get into a faster cycle of being in their current June billing cycle if you have your invoice into them faster. Improve your project manager timesheet approval process. You know, I look at what PMs do. They're barely glazing over the timesheets. In some cases, you have supervisors approving timesheets, and the PMs never see the time and expense that's charged to a project until the very end of the month. And at that point, everything's a mess. And so I recommend that you send out a weekly time charge report to your PMs every Monday or something like that, so they can look at the time charge the week before and make sure it's correct. Minimize your rate schedules. I go into firms, they have 100 rate schedules, and every single time they create a new proposal, they create a new rate schedule. It's ridiculous. You should have standard rates and enforce a policy where there's little deviation from rates. I see people using rates from 5 years ago by accident. There's just all kinds of stupid things going on because people are pulling up old spreadsheets that have old rates on them and using those for doing their estimates. There's a lot of bad habits going on in many firms, and these are things you can fix. And not only is that going to make you more profitable, but it's going to minimize the nightmare of your billing people and all the junk they have to go through every month to get your bills done, especially on new projects. 2 days to turn around billing reports. And if it was my company, it would be 1 day. 1 day. I send out the billing reports Monday morning, you get them back to me Tuesday. It's a priority. It's a high priority, and they know. They can put it on their calendar. I am going to be getting my billing reports, and I am going to set aside from 4 to 6 p.m. on Monday afternoon on this date once a month to approve my bills. And that should be a set appointment on your calendars of your billing managers. And the next big challenge is collections. There's just so many issues around collections. First of all, your PMs are probably the busiest people in your firm. And what I see happening in many firms is PMs are responsible for everything, pretty much everything. And they are responsible for, in many firms, the bulk of the collection work. My personal opinion is that is not a great strategy. I think it needs to be a partnership between your project accountants, if you have them, hopefully, your billers or your PMs, and your accounting department. And I've seen firms hire, I like to call them pit bull collectors, hire those people to do the heavy lifting on the collections. They're not afraid to make those phone calls. They take a lot of the burden off the PMs. The PMs want to be the good cop, you know. They don't want to be the bad cop. Now, I will say I don't think collection calls have to be scary or negative. Collection calls can be a really good opportunity for your PM to reach out to your client and say, hey, what's going on? Why is it taking so long to pay us? Is there a problem? Are you holding up our invoice payments for a specific reason? What's really going on here? So if you have a good relationship with your client, that should be a simple question to ask. And your client should be able and willing to give you a good reason why they're not paying. If it's because they're, for some reason, not getting or saying they're not getting the invoices, there are processes you can put in place to make sure you confirm the very same day or the next day or within a couple days after sending it that they have it, and that it's okay. If they're holding it up because you have a $50 expense item on a $10,000 invoice, then there's things you can do, like billing your expenses on a separate invoice, so that they can't use that excuse to hold up your billings. If it's because they don't like the backup you're giving them or the information you're providing, you can fix that. But you don't know until you find out what is really going on. The other thing is, your PMs really don't understand how to ask for money and how to talk about it with a client about money without having it feel like an adversarial conversation. You know, very often, I was working with one of our clients, or about 150-person environmental firm, and they were putting together a new AR process. Their AR was getting too high, and they had too many ARs over 90 days. And they were putting, again, they have what were called service area managers. And they wanted their service area managers to make more frequent and better calls to clients for their collections. And I read through, first of all, they sent me a 9-page process. So I sat down with them and we cut that back to about 2.5 pages. I told them, your employees are never going to read this. They're never going to read a 9-page process. It was just too much. And it needed to be simplified dramatically. Now, other firms don't have any process. If you have no process, then you should not have any expectations about what's going to happen. You must have a written collection process. It should be simple and easy to follow. It should include documentation on how to record collection calls in your system, and it should include what language and scripts to use for, you know, how do you ask for money? Your PMs, they were technical employees, and then all of a sudden one day they're a project manager and they're expected to know how to write proposals and do interviews and hire people and manage people and keep projects on budget and schedule. And now they're expected to ask for change orders and ask clients to pay money, and they don't know how to do that. And this is something that you need to train them to do. Very often I do role-playing sessions with clients, and it's very, very valuable. It was interesting. I was doing one last week with one of our clients, engineering firm, and I called on one of the engineers. It's funny because I'll say to them, okay, one of you gets to be the unreasonable client, and the other one gets to be the engineer, and I want you to ask the client, to pay the invoice. And it was amazing to me how scared the engineer was. He was almost shaking. He's like, well, I'm just not good at this. This is not comfortable for me. And I was really surprised. He had over 10 years experience. And so this is not their strength. Now you can make them a lot stronger, help them get a lot stronger with these conversations, but you really need to focus on it. You have to do role playing and give them really good scripts and demonstrate for them how easy it is, and show them, let them sit in on other people's calls who are good at it. This is something they're not born knowing how to do. And they really don't understand business in general. So the urgency behind it, the understanding that it really isn't a negative or adversarial thing to ask a client for a change order or to pay an AR. This is business. This is what we do. This is part of being a manager and growing into a leader in your firm. And this is part of a normal responsibility. But give them every kind of help you can give them to become great at this. I mentioned the effective collection process. A good process will have who does what, when, what do they do, how do they do it, and when. How often do they do it? And, you know, there's got to be accountability around it as well. I mean, I don't have that as a bullet here, but accountability is extremely important. If you have an expectation that managers are going to make collection calls, then there has to be some consequences. And there can also be reward and recognition for doing a great job. And even incentivizing them with bonuses if they are great at collections. So, you know, looking at this holistically is really important. Create some leverage. A lot of firms don't want to put late fees in their contracts, and even if they have late fees in the contracts, they don't want to ask. They don't want to ask for the clients to pay the late fees, so they don't put those late fees on their. They don't put the late fees on their invoices and bill it. I recommend that you go ahead and bill it. If your clients aren't paying you and it is part of your contract, go ahead and put it on there. Now, I will tell you, you may have to write it off, but my experience is it will make them pay you faster. So you may not get paid for those late fees, and there may be a little bit of a pain that you have to go through in your system to write off those late fees. If they don't pay, but it does make them pay faster, I promise you. So having consequences, even a consequence like saying you're going to stop work, that's really important. And then again, if your clients consistently don't pay you, you need to fire your bad clients. Now, you may be able to live with extremely long payment cycles if you're making a ton of profit off the client, but in many cases you can't. So you can't make a profit with a client who's not paying you. And if you take into account that full cash flow cycle, you know, it's not worth it. I just want to tell you a quick little story. From 1990 to 2005, I did the books for a architectural firm. They started out, when I first started with them, they were around 20 employees, but they grew to, maybe 75 employees over those 15 years. And they did a lot of government work. They worked, I'm in the DC area. They did a lot of work with State Department and GSA, and they did a lot of international work with State Department, consulates and embassies. Really interesting work, actually. And I would sit, Tom Toohey was the principal of 4 principals in this firm, and he was their business manager for the most part. There were four partners, and Tom was the one that understood business. The other 3 principals were just designers, and some of them were good at going out and getting business, but they weren't really good at the business side, the financial side with contracts and all the other financial stuff. So Tom ran the back office of the architectural firm, and they had a lot of engineers as subs. And I would sit with Tom a couple times a month in his office, and we would do the bills, and we would pay accounts payable. I would help him get his financial statements done, payroll, all that fun stuff, bank reconciliations. This is what I did a long time ago. And I would sit there, and inevitably engineers would start calling Tom. They knew Tom was the money guy in the firm, and they weren't getting paid. Many of them were on pay when paid, and they weren't getting paid. Tom wasn't paying them. And honestly, Tom at one point had some very poor cash flow he was trying to manage in his architectural firm. And he was really, extending the amount of time that to take to pay his engineers. And so I would watch this every day. These engineers would call, and Tom would, they would call and they'd say, we need to get paid on these invoices. And Tom would look over at me and he'd say, damn it, cut him a check. And he did this over and over and over again. And I, learned really quick that the squeaky wheel gets the oil. The engineers that called all the time were the ones that got paid. And the ones that never called, wow, he would wait and wait and wait to pay them. The only reason I'm not afraid to tell this story, Tom passed away a number of years ago, and he was such an awesome guy, really, really amazing architect, worked on some amazing projects, and I loved him. But I learned a lot about cash flow from sitting and helping Tom manage that architectural firm. So keep that in mind. That is what's going on behind the scenes with your clients. And if you call them a lot, you will get paid faster. So those are some of the ideas that I have, and I hope they were very helpful for you. If you would like to get a copy, it's an electronic copy of my book, so if you go download it, you'll get it immediately. You don't have to go to Amazon and buy it. You can download it. Actually, I'm happy to send you a hard copy if you prefer, and I'll give you my email address in a sec. But if you just want to get an electronic copy, you can go to this website, aecbusiness.com/ebook, and you can download it right away. And this is an abridged version, a shorter version of my original book. It has lots of great ideas for how to make more money in your A&E firm. I've literally worked with hundreds of engineering firms, and I took the cumulative experience of many years seeing what they could be doing better to make more money and put it all in this one book. And I have a 10-course training program that I've developed around the book, which is guaranteed to increase your profit. Cash is King is one of the 10 courses that we offer. And there's courses on scope creep and project management and client relationships and sales and marketing and many other things that will help you improve how you run your firm and how you improve your processes and your systems and get your PMs doing everything that you want them to do and get them to think and act like an owner, which they don't right now. And I'm starting a new group next month. I'm calling it a case study group. One of the things that I always do with all of my clients is I measure results. If you don't measure results, you're not going to get any results, or you're not going to know whether things that you're doing are working or not. So I will help you get your employees to think like an owner, to improve your ineffective business processes and improve how you use your systems and get your employees to use your systems. Because if you can have the best system in the world, and if your employees don't use your systems, you're going to have bad data and a bad ability to make decisions. So if you're interested in learning more about it, see if it's a good fit for you, reach out, send me an email. I'm also happy to send you a hard copy of my book if you're interested, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have about cash flow or about business profitability. I love talking to people. I know many of you actually. I've met some of you in the past at other ACEC conferences, and I spoke at ACEC Texas. Oh God, it's probably been about 3 years ago, I think. I think it was 2017 that I was there talking. And so I've met many of you, and I've met many of you at the national conferences as well. And so I'd love to talk to you and see how you're doing through this COVID crisis. If there's anything I can do to help you. And I'm just going to look at the Q&A. Will we receive the slides from today's webinar? I will be sending out an email to all of you later today with either today, it may end up being tomorrow morning. I have to see how fast I can get it out, but it will have copies of the slides. It will have a link here to download the book, and it will also have a link to the recording. If there's anyone else in your firm that you would like to watch, feel free to share that link with them, and they can go and watch the recording of today's web training. And I hope you found this really valuable. If there's any additional questions, please put them in the Q&A. Or feel free to email me at jjewel@aecbusiness.com, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Any specific questions about cash flow or any big challenges that you have that are driving you crazy and struggling with clients to try to get them to pay you. So I really appreciate you all attending today, and I hope you found this extremely valuable. Again, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I hope to talk with all of you and see you again in the future. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.